The first thing you want to do is drain some of the coolant out. So after you take the bottom engine cover off, and I got one of them aftermarket metal ones, here on the driver's side, right here is your petcock. You turn that counterclockwise. Now, so you don't make a mess, I found a little piece of heater hose here. You could use heater hose or clear plastic hose, whatever. To kind of tuck that up underneath there to direct the coolant out this way so it doesn't make a big mess, because otherwise it hits this plastic thing and runs all over the place. Place your drain pan underneath and drain some of that coolant out. Now, some guys I've seen do it without draining the coolant out, and then a whole bunch of coolant spills out from the thermostat housing. I think this is a bit of a cleaner approach. You'll get less spillage if you drain coolant out of the petcock first. Plus, it's a good idea to refresh your coolant once in a while. So drain it out and fill it back up with new coolant. You don't have to do an entire flush, but if you drain out the radiator and then fill it back up, that's always a good idea to do occasionally. Keep that coolant fresh. And just a tip on these, you don't crank them out. All you do is you turn them about 90 degrees counterclockwise, and it's like a valve. You pull it out, pull, and then it starts to run. All right, I'm gonna reach and open that baby up. Get my drain pan under there. Here we go. Crack open the reservoir to let some air in. Then the coolant will really start to flow. All right, take your bolts out, a dipstick, and remove the engine cover. I always crank these out all the way. There we go. Don't forget to put your dipstick back. You don't want to lose it or get anything inside that wonderful TDI. Okay, the thermostat on these is right up front, right underneath the fuel pump, the injection pump. Right in here, you can see it's the lower radiator hose going into this plastic housing. And there's 2 bolts, and the thermostat is behind that plastic housing. All right, first we'll remove that hose clamp. If you have proper hose clamp pliers, those are best. But needle nose works okay too. Grab that off. All right, I'll wiggle this. A couple small drops of coolant came out, but not much. If we hadn't drained the radiator, I think you'd see a lot more coolant coming out. So, and the alternator's right underneath here, so you wouldn't want to spill a bunch of coolant all over and inside the alternator. All right, there are 2 10mm bolts, one on the top and one on the bottom. I've got an extension and a long socket here, and that is just about perfect. It allows me to get a ratchet on out here in the open. Oh, not too tight, that's good. And the bottom. Back those out. Okay, I've removed those bolts, or at least loosened them all the way. I don't want to drop them. One 10mm bolt, and this one's a little more awkward. Two. All right, now use a rag here. It's dripping a little bit. Just wiggle it up and down to kind of break it free. And come on out of there, you. There. So there's the housing where the thermostat sits. And the thermostat, I don't know if you can see it, I'll shine my light down there. It's just sitting in there. So, to get that out, all right, the thermostat might be sticky in there. Got a little pry bar. When it opens, there's still coolant in the block. I put a rag to protect the alternator, and put another drain pan on under the vehicle on this side, because you're going to spill coolant. There are coolant lines going into the bottom of the oil filter canister here, down here at the bottom. That's probably the low point on the engine, and it's probably a good idea to disconnect those lines and drain the coolant out of the block down there. You see where I'm pointing down here underneath the oil filter. There's coolant lines at a lower point. That would prevent the spillage we're having right now. But we didn't do that, so we're going to deal with a little bit of spillage, catch it in the drain pan underneath, and avoid having to take these coolant lines off here on the right hand side. Alright, once that coolant's drained, you can reach in and pull the thermostat and the O-ring out. This one's a little sticky, this O-ring. It's been in there a long time, I think. There. And there's the old thermostat out. Alright, let's look at the old housing and the old thermostat compared to the new ones. The thermostat looks identical. Now the housing, the reason why they sell replacement housings is because when you take the old housing out, there's these little tabs that the thermostat sits in that almost always break, unless you're really careful in the way that you remove this. These tabs break. Now the new one, you see those little tabs aren't broken, obviously. Those little tabs just sit inside the thermostat here to hold it into the housing. So you put the gasket on first, obviously, and then turn that like that. The gasket helps it sit tighter. Stick it in and then twist it, and there it's nice and solid for the install into the motor. Now you could reuse your old one. It just makes the install a little more tedious because you're then balancing your thermostat in there with nothing to hold on to it. And so not a big deal. There's lots of room there. You can reach in and just kind of make sure you keep things straight and then get the bolts in. So you can reuse this, but the replacements aren't very expensive. I think they're like, well, it's been a while since I bought this, maybe $10 or something, and it just makes it easier, cleaner. You pop it in, put the bolts in, and you're done. Why Volkswagen designed it like this, with little tabs that break off so easily, I don't know. But that's how it's done. You can reuse this, or you can pay a few bucks and get a new housing. I don't know if this is necessary to lubricate the O-ring. I feel better about taking a little bit of coolant, new coolant, and just kind of going around that O-ring. So I don't know if it makes any difference, but I feel that that will help it seat into its position better and prevent any possibility it's going to slip or bind or come out. Probably unnecessary, but doesn't hurt. All right, time to put that new one in. The old one came out with the part numbers on the top, which kind of makes sense. It looks pretty symmetrical to me. It might not matter this way or this way, but I'm going to keep the part numbers up like the old one was. Don't touch anything. Don't get it dirty on the way in. This reminds me of something. Okay. Line the bolts up and thread those bolts in. And the bottom one a little harder to reach. Not too bad though. And tighten them up to the torque spec. Now reattach that radiator hose. There's a stop there, so it only goes on so far. And put the hose clamp back on. Oh, how convenient. Get her on the corner there. Now we'll take our needle nose. I do have a pair of those pliers, but I don't have them with me today. This is a bit tedious. They're easier to get off than put back on. Come on, you. Get on there, you bitch. Oh, there we go. We'll line it back up to how it was. Not that it really matters too much, but... there. Okay, quick note on coolant. Only use the Volkswagen Audi coolant. Used to be called G12. This was the stuff that you mix with distilled water, 50-50 or whatever, depending on how low you want it to go. 50-50 is minus 35, that's Fahrenheit. 60-40 takes you to minus 62, 70-30 minus 83. Volkswagen's discontinued G12 now, they call it G13 now, and it's a premix. So it's 50-50 mixed, all ready to go. You can't even buy the old stuff anymore, the G12, I don't think. Yeah, and they just have it set to minus 35 now. So you can't make it any stronger anymore unless you happen to have some of the old stuff. But don't use Prestone or any of that universal fits-all makes and models stuff. Go to the dealer. It's no more expensive than the parts store in my experience, and get the proper VW stuff. There's also some aftermarket equivalents that apparently work for VW and Audi. It's probably the same stuff, but it's just easier and simpler, in my opinion, to go to the dealer and get the G13. Finally, refill with coolant. Now, don't forget to close the radiator at the bottom before you do this. There's going to be some air bubbles in the system, so I'm going to fill this right up to there or so. And getting the air bubbles out of the system is another topic. I'm going to run the vehicle and warm it up with this not sealed so that air bubbles can escape out of here. Squeeze the radiator hoses to try and get some air out. These motors, from what I understand, aren't particularly difficult to bleed air from. They They kind of do it on their own as they run, but just to get the initial air out, I'm going to make sure any air that comes through these lines is able to escape. There's other videos. You can look at people that put Mighty Vacs on here and suck air out and all kinds of stuff, but I'm going to run it with this open, squeeze the hoses, watch the level, make sure I continue to top up, and call it a day. Thanks for watching this video, and good luck with your thermostat replacement projects on your Volkswagen TDI. Catch you next time.